Breaking news. JLR investigates with the breaking news. JP Miller. He's in big trouble with the law, folks. He's in court today, folks. There is a court hearing going on right now in South Carolina regarding JP Miller suing a bunch of protesters or getting restraining orders against a bunch of protesters that have been out there in front of the Solid Rock Church now for 10 months. 10 months. Wow. And then, folks, this is even bigger. On top of the mounting federal investigation against John-Paul Miller, he is now being sued. He's being sued for the most egregious thing you could possibly think of, folks. He's being sued because he's being accused of committing RAPE on a 15-year-old minor. Oh, my goodness, folks. What in the world is going on with the Mica Miller case? He's in court today. This is a picture of him today while he was at the courthouse facing a mountains amount of protesters. By the way, one of the restraining orders that he filed against the protester has already been dismissed by a judge. I think the judge is going to say, dismissed, out of here, dismissed, out of here, dismissed, out of here. He's using lawfare against the individuals that are protesting against him. This is a topic that we've covered extensively on JLR Investigates. Terrible tragedy. Mica Miller. We like to call her Mica Francis. Mica Francis, April 27th, last year. Terrible tragedy, as some of you might or might not know. I believe that she did commit suicide. A lot of people are conflicted on that. However, I do believe that individuals, including the person that we're talking about today, contributed, caused her to put her at that last edge, right before she crossed that terrible line. It was a terrible case. We've gotten to meet her family, friends, people around the church. We've been boots on the ground extensively with this case. Now, I thought, folks, that I would come on today and say that breaking news, JP Miller has been indicted by a federal grand jury. And I do believe and have hope that that will happen. When I say hope, that is showing my biased opinion that JP Miller is guilty of a lot of things. I've done my research. I came to my own opinion about the case. JP Miller, some of you call him a pastor. People call him a fake pastor. Some say that he's a very controversial figure that resides in the Myrtle Beach area. Him and his dad, Dr. Reginald Wayne Miller, who, by the way, Dr. Reginald Wayne Miller was also in court with him today in support, along with Trisha Ross. His clan of people were in the courthouse today. Now, you know there's been protesters outside that church every weekend. They've been out there protesting, bringing justice for Mica, and each protester out there has reasons to be out there, right? It's a mixed bag of reasons, but it's centered around this very controversial figure here, a very shadowy figure, a very charismatic figure in the church circles around there, Solid Rock, Market Commons, church that was put there, in the middle of a residential area, bought up on cheap land. He goes in and then he builds this congregation that started out small. Eventually, at its peak, it was hundreds and hundreds of members at Solid Rock right before the tragic death of Mica Miller. And then everything started crumbling for this guy big time. And he's still in the limelight. He's still centered around a bunch of controversy, and it is still existing. So we're going to talk about JP Miller and what happened today. Today, folks, there is a court hearing right now. I do not know the outcome. I do not have a feed out there to see exactly what is going on inside the courthouse, Horry County. But there is an article out. That says JP Miller in court to seek restraining orders against protesters. And this is the hallway of the court, and you can clearly see people in the court. Now, does that person right there look familiar to you? Ding, 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 ding. Who is that? Who is that? in the courtroom with him. And he's wearing shades. Does he not want to look at people in the eye? And then who is that right there? Who is that? And who is that? Oh, if you've been following this case extensively, you know who that is. And you definitely know who that is. Some arguably will say that this is the one that knows all the secrets. The right-hand woman of J.P. Miller. Yeah, Trisha Ross. Trisha Ross. You know Trisha Ross. Possibly under federal investigation herself. Trisha Ross still involved with him. For all the people that left the church, yes, still a few loyalists left. Trisha Ross. How do you feel about Trisha Ross? All right, so what's going on with this thing? Because J.P. Miller's offering to drop these restraining orders against protesters. And we're going to talk about a civil lawsuit. A day after being accused of raping a 15-year-old girl in a civil lawsuit. Yuck, gross, disgusting. J.P. Miller was in court Wednesday morning on a separate matter. Miller appeared in Myrtle Beach Magistrate Court as he pursued restraining orders against four Justice for Mica protesters. One has already been dismissed. Breaking news. A large group of churchgoers, including John-Paul Miller's dad, Reginald, was there in support of J.P. Miller. Reginald Wayne Miller. One of the 4 restraining orders was dismissed by a judge, and the other 3 are being rolled into one hearing. You know what that means? Consolidate all 3, where the judge cannot waste his time going denied on each and every one of them. Just put all 3 of them, the remaining ones, into play and say, look, you have the right to peacefully protest on a public sidewalk. There's no inviolate. You're a public figure. You're centered around controversy. You are the subject of a current criminal federal investigation. You are a person that puts yourself out there by giving taped sermons and taped religion speeches, right? You're not a private person, Mr. J.P. Miller, and this is a public interest case. So as long as these people don't cross the line and as long as they don't go knocking on your door or literally following you everywhere, same people, not just a one-time incident where someone follows you, you can't lump them all in. You don't got a case against any of these protesters. You got 0 case. It's only used to weaponize the process or intimidate them into not protesting. And thus far, I've seen the protesters pretty much super chill out there. Yeah, they got a bullhorn at one point. One was dressed up as a Jesus. They are very passionate, Justice for Mica, but they're not breaking the law. They're on a public sidewalk, and that area is all like commercialized and residential around that area. So people have the right to be there, as long as you're on the sidewalk and as long as you're not protesting. By the way, I got to update all cases that he's filed against the protesters have been dismissed. Every single case. Update. Breaking news. Every single restraining order that he's filed against protesters has now officially been dismissed. It just came across the wire. All restraining orders against the protesters are now dismissed. That's good. Demonstrators with the Justice for Mica movement have targeted Miller and his Solid Rock ministry since Mica Miller's death. He actually sold the church just last week for a cool $2.1 something million to a place called Salem Holdings. We talked about that. The protesters grew out of abuse and harassment allegations that surfaced in the weeks and months following her death, which is Mica Miller. People are passionate for justice for Mica Miller, right? Justice for Mica Miller. Earlier this month, a judge denied J.P. Miller's request for a restraining order against Melissa Post. The ruling came after 3 of the 4 incidents cited by Miller in his complaint against Post were stricken during a lengthy hearing. At least 2 incidents are needed for a restraining order to be issued. So he didn't get that restraining order against Miss Post. That's what J.P. Miller likes to do. One pattern, and I will say, I wouldn't go near this guy personally, right? I wouldn't even confront this guy. I wouldn't even have a conversation with this guy in person, because this dude has a pattern and history of weaponizing the judicial process and getting people hemmed up in ridiculous restraining orders. Now, I'm shocked and surprised South Carolina doesn't have a statute, or maybe they do, that these protesters can seek remedy about by suing them back and seeking sanctions for bringing up a ridiculous restraining order and wasting everyone's time and money. Takes a lot of time and resources to go with this, and none of it has merit. But one thing I've noticed about J.P. Miller, in particular by studying this guy and getting the police reports, the public police reports centered around his name months after the death of Mica Miller, he has a pattern of accusing people of stalking him. He has a pattern of accusing people to have guns. He makes these claims against people saying, oh, they have a gun on them, they have a gun on them, and draws police out to these places only for them to have no weight, no merit. A News 13 reporter asked John-Paul Miller about the rape allegations as he walked into court Wednesday, but J.P. Miller had no comment. No comment about the RAPE allegations. So, it looks like, folks, we have a resolution in reference to the restraining orders. They are no longer in play. Now, what do we got next? Well, J.P. Miller is being sued. He's being sued. Major legal troubles for John-Paul Miller. He's facing a lawsuit. Why? Well, he's being sued for RAPE of a minor. What a sick. Now, I got a clip here, and we'll share the clip, and then we'll share the news stories to bring attention to this situation right here.
11, a lawsuit filed today in Horry County claims Myrtle Beach pastor John-Paul Miller sexually assaulted a 15-year-old girl in 1998. Thank you for joining us at 11. I'm Edward Moody.
And I'm Trish Willifer. The filing states they had another run-in more than 2 decades later.
New at 11, News 13's Adriana Lawrence breaks down what's in the lawsuit. But first, a warning. Some details may be disturbing.
The 43-page lawsuit filed by a Jane Doe claims John-Paul Miller and his father, Reginald Wayne Miller, fostered sexual abuse and predatory conduct in their former church. She claims not only was she harmed, but so were numerous minors.
Since Mica's death, it doesn't surprise me because of what I've heard since then.
The controversy around John-Paul Miller and Salt Rock Church began in late April of last year after his wife Mica died by suicide. Allegations of abuse followed, but one woman who wants to remain anonymous claims Miller's abuse allegations date back to 1998. In the lawsuit, she claims she was attending Sunday school at Miller's father's church when Miller forced her outside, brought her into his truck, and raped her. It states Miller was 19 and she was just 15 years old. Then in 2023, she claims she ran into Miller again, and when he leaned in to hug her, he touched her inappropriately. Her attorney, Randall Hood, says she repressed memories of the first incident, but it came flooding back after the latest one.
She had heard that there were multiple other victims over the years, and it is her hope that in bringing light to the situation that it will keep it from ever happening again.
It states Miller was employed by his father as a youth leader, and his father allowed him to prey on young teens while in a leadership position. She claims the church was his, quote, sexual playground. Hood says she never reported either incident to police.
At the end of the day, whether it's this church or any other church, pastors and leaders of churches need to be held accountable when things happen to children.
Miller is also being investigated by the FBI. Hood says the agency has been in contact with her, but he's unsure if she shared anything. Former Solid Rock Church member Bernie Kennerson left the church shortly after Mica's death and says he's glad he left when he did.
My hope and prayer is that he would repent and take accountability for any and all of things.
Now, we've reached out to both Miller and his attorney, Russell Long, who said no comment, but that he only represents Miller and Solid Rock. But Reginald Miller told us to refer to Long for comment. It says both Millers have 30 days to answer. In the newsroom, Adriana Lawrence, News 13.
And the lawsuit filed today also claims Miller, his father, and their group of ministries ran the churches, quote, for their own personal financial gain. The complaint also pulls apart the church's financial standing in a bid to prevent a cap on damages due to religious and nonprofit protections. Now, you can read the full lawsuit and find a timeline of our coverage of John Paul Miller at WBTW.com.
Whoa! Major lawsuit filed against J.P. Miller. Myrtle Beach pastor J.P. Miller accused of raping a 15-year-old girl. A woman claims Solid Rock pastor J.P. Miller allegedly assaulted her when she was 15 years old. Do you think the accuser's telling the truth? Continuing a pattern of SA and predatory conduct. A 43-page complaint filed in Horry County Circuit Court alleges that JP touched her genitals without her consent as recently as 2023. And that assault triggered repressed memories of a previous assault by him that occurred nearly 20 years earlier when she was 15 years old and he was 19. Keep in mind, folks, this guy had a pardon, got a pardon for his prior conduct. Remember, he ran over the woman when he was younger? He got a pardon for that. And a lot of people think his pardon should be rescinded because what happened with his pardon was once he got a pardon, he was able to possess firearms. And in those firearms, he was, at that point, using them to threaten the family of Mica Miller, the Francis family. Pretty scary. Pretty scary. Oh, by the way, the individual, the lawyer that filed the attorney, Randy Hood, the lawyer that filed the lawsuit against him, he spoke. He actually shared a little bit about this lawsuit on TikTok, of all places. And I have his clip right here. Let's get some details from him first to find out exactly what he's talking about in reference to this lawsuit.
Hello, my name is Randy Hood. As many of you know, I represent victims of child sexual abuse in South Carolina and other states in the United States. This morning I filed a case on behalf of a Jane Doe against John Paul Miller, Reginald Wayne Miller, Cathedral Church, and Solid Rock Ministries in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. John Paul Miller is also known as the former husband of Mica Miller. In my case, Jane Doe alleged that in 1998, John Paul Miller sexually assaulted her at Cathedral Church while it was being run by his father, Reginald Wayne Miller. She also alleges that in 2023, he sexually assaulted her again. This case involves complex issues involving repressed memory and not understanding what happened to you until much later. Stay tuned.
Oh, Randy Hood. But you know who else is being sued? And imagine this. This happens right after Solid Rock sells their church. Reginald Wayne Miller, you know this guy right here, the one that flashed himself to an undercover back in the day. The one is centered around some controversy here regarding burnt churches through the Piedmont area of South Carolina, Florence, South Carolina area. Remember these mysterious church burnings that he was affiliated with? Centered around controversy, indicted by the federal government in the past for sweatshop labor of people coming over from other countries coming in under services, under his teachings, his religious teachings. In return, he'd make them and force them to commit types of slavery for pennies of the dollar and threatened to deport them back if they told. This guy right here, he's also part of the lawsuit. So you got Reginald Wayne Miller, J.P. Miller, Solid Rock Church, which is sold. Yikes. Yikes. It's a 43 page complaint. Randall Hood is the person that represents the woman. He told News 13 Tuesday the FBI has been in contact with her, but is unsure if she shared anything with the agency. So, according to Randall Hood, who we just heard, the attorney, the FBI has talking to or met with the victim. What does that mean? But unclear what was shared. The FBI met with the victim. Could she be part of this criminal case against J.P. Miller on the federal level? She had heard that there were multiple other victims over the years, he said, and it is her hope that it brings light to the situation, that it will keep it from ever happening again. I'm also going to bring Magnolia in the chat shortly. It is a 43-page complaint. It names the Millers, J.P. and Dr. Reginald Wayne Miller, All Nations Cathedral Church, formerly the Cathedral Baptist Church of Grand Strand and Solid Rock Ministries. The defendants, both individually and together, have built and maintained and concealed a system of sexual misconduct that harmed numerous minors, including plaintiff Jane Doe number 1. The complaint says. It's a big deal. He's already facing criminal charges. He doesn't need this. But you get what's coming, J.P. Miller. I say this because you are so quick to file all these lawsuits against people, pro se, without Russell Long, pro se, and you have to expect it to be dished out in return. If you dish it out, you have to be able to take it back. And J.P. Miller seems like he's weaponizing the legal process, and it seems like people now are fighting back. My take of the situation is, why in the world is this guy even still in Myrtle Beach? I thought he would just fall off the face of the earth, off the radar, and move to another location and try to lay low for a while. Unclear why J.P. Miller would choose to stay in the exact location where all these allegations have occurred. Now, his dad, to give his dad some credit, his dad was smart over the years. When his dad was involved in scandals, he would try to sell off the places that he's involved with and move to other locations. But J.P. Miller ain't doing that. Unless he's defiant, unless he has this thing he claims he's being persecuted, and this is a test of God to test his resilience. I think personally he might even like this attention. Probably getting more attention than he had when he was at the church, standing there in front of a congregation, a growing congregation that was going to grow across the street from his house. But all those plans have been disrupted. In 2023, the woman at the lawsuits center encountered... Okay, so what happened is, here's what's happened. Here's what happened. It's a Jane Doe. In 1998, she claimed she was attending Sunday school at Miller's father's church. After conversating with Miller, he forced her into his father's office, shutting the door behind him. That's what he's accused of doing. Now, she was 15, he was 19. He then forcibly moved her outside, brought her into his truck, and did the unthinkable. It states she was, I don't even want to say that, the V word. In 2023, fast forward, the woman at the lawsuit center encountered J.P. Miller again in person during a trip to Myrtle Beach with a friend. That's when he leaned in to hug her and shoved his hand down her pants without her consent. Now, 2023, he's married to Mica Miller, right? He's married to Mica, right? Isn't he supposed to be married to Mica in 2023? Yeah. And he's accused of re-victimizing another victim from back when he was a teenager, according to the lawsuit. He's gross. Exactly, he's gross. Now, why would the victim even meet up with him? Is she telling the truth? Is the victim actually, do you believe the victim? I don't even know who Jane Doe is. Lawyers have to put their necks out when they file these lawsuits against people. So the lawyer put the lawsuit out. Against him. We'll see what happens with that. A short time later, the woman and Miller got into a heated argument over use of his title as pastor and citing scripture to justify the assault. Oh my God. He used the religious card to justify the assault and used scripture. That's wickedness. That's wicked with the tongue. If it's true. Is it true? Do you believe it? In response, JPM cited scripture telling plaintiff, no man is without sin and temptation. God understands that. So that's what he's doing. He's using scripture as justification for what he did to this victim while married to Mica Miller. While he was married to Mica. The woman's lawsuit also raises questions about financial dealings of the ministries and their leaders. Now, that's big considering that's what the FBI is looking at. Kimberly, thank you. At the end of the day, whether it's this church or any other church, pastors and leaders of churches need to be held accountable when things happen to children. That's what the plaintiff's lawyer said. He's being sued. J.P. Miller has repeatedly refused to speak with News 13, which also reached out to him Tuesday for this story. Attorney Russell Long, who has represented Miller in other legal matters, declined to comment about this. And personally, I don't even think Russell Long defends J.P. Miller anymore because J.P. Miller would have had Russell Long file those lawsuits against the protesters. But instead, J.P. Miller filed the restraining orders pro se himself. So I don't even think he has a lawyer. He's going to need a lawyer down the line. He's going to need a lawyer for this, unless he wants to take on Mr. Hood and the victims pro se. But you would think that he would get a lawyer, and he definitely needs a lawyer down the line when he gets indicted. When I say when he gets indicted, I don't mean if. I mean when. You know the federal grand juries indict 99.9% of the time. They have a 97% conviction rate. And when a federal grand jury convenes, the target gets indicted. They indict hand sandwiches. They indict. So he's getting indicted. It's just a matter of when. Now, we've been talking about this federal investigation, the raid months back, the raid of his house. It takes time. It takes time. They have up to 18 months. But I suspect probably within the next month or two, J.P. Miller will be taken out in handcuffs and indicted by the District of South Carolina, U.S. Federal Court. He's going to kick it up a notch to the federal level. News 13 also contacted Dr. Reginald Wayne Miller, who was in court today supporting J.P. Miller, who in text referred a reporter to Russell Long. Russell Long, does he represent him? John-Paul Miller has been embroiled in controversy, and we know about all this controversy. He's been embroiled in controversy since his wife's death. Over and over, he's been in the news. Remember, he went on News Nation with all those crocodile tears. Crocodile rocks he's a part owner of. We're told that while working at Crocodile Rocks, he'd walk out of Crocodile Rocks with a bag full of cash and launder that money into different bank accounts. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. That's what we're told. And that's one of the things the FBI is investigating J.P. Miller for. Money laundering, fraud, wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, RICO. On top of whatever else centered around Mica Miller and her death. They're definitely investigating. And also, folks, J.P. Miller was jailed on an assault charge. I even forgot about that. I forgot that there was a mugshot out there of J.P. Miller. A mugshot of him. Back in November. We shared it. He went to jail briefly. Got bailed out. But still. He hasn't been able to keep his nose clean or live that holy life. The godly life like this guy preaches onto others while demanding money under the guise of tithing. It's not a practice what you preach scenario here. He lives in the Azela Lakes neighborhood near Myrtle Beach. His home was searched by the FBI. Here's another thing. He also has sued a former paralegal accusing her of libel and slander on social media and multiple protesters. All the protesters' lawsuits have been dropped. Through court records show that some of the cases were dismissed. Jane Doe's lawsuit claims that Miller's churches operated without adequate protections for minors. Whoa. Don't they got the academy there? Yikes. Isn't there a lot of children that go to the academy there? Yes. Maybe not anymore. I think a lot of the protesters scared everyone away. Well, rightfully so, right? Would you want this guy? Some people call him a monster. Do you think he's a monster? Would you like this guy preaching to your children? Would you want this guy preaching to your children? Would you want his dad, who has a history of exposing himself and other egregious acts towards people from overseas coming in the country working for him, pennies on the dollar? Would you want him? Would you trust your children alone? Reginald Wayne Miller? Yeah. It created an environment where abuse could thrive at the churches. One where his dad had, and one J.P. Miller himself, Solid Rock. Solid Rock's being sued. Solid as a rock. It was part of a calculated plan to groom victims while gaining the committee's trust and financial support. Tithing. His whole thing was tithing. He made buckets off heartstrings of vulnerable people that would attend his church, and he would con and bamboozle them. We heard the reports. In order to be really close to J.P. Miller, he would have to have access to your finances, where he would, and Trisha Ross maybe Trisha Ross too, would analyze it like a fine comb, and then tell the participants, you must donate a portion of your finances to us. We want your money. Right? Yeah. That's what he's being accused of. Am I saying it as a statement of fact? No. But I'm saying it because, he tends to sue people. Don't sue me, J.P. Miller. I'm in Florida, first off, and I'm protected by the First Amendment, J.P. Miller. He's never actually threatened to sue me. He's threatened to sue others. But I don't think he would have a chance against us, because we are speaking based off news reports and giving us opinions based off news reports mixed in with facts. But he has an opportunity to contact me to set the record straight before he can initiate any successful lawsuit. He has to give me a chance to retract. And you know what? Covering this case now for 10 months, never, ever, ever has J.P. Miller reached out to JLR Investigates and demanded any retraction of anything. That means, hey, we're speaking how it is. We're speaking how it is. Though he has a tendency of suing people left and right. He files lawsuits against people. Lawfare. We've heard the term lawfare. The lawsuit also alleges that the Millers failed to put in place policies to protect minors from abuse by adult church members. Oh yeah, he's in big trouble. He's in big trouble, folks. J.P. Miller. So there was another guy at the courthouse today. I forgot to share this, but he was sharing a little bit about what was going on today in reference to these restraining orders that he filed against protesters. I want to share this with you and get an assessment outside the courthouse in South Carolina today.
Hey everybody, Private Gas coming at you outside the Myrtle Beach Magistrates Courthouse, where John Paul Miller is suing several people for restraining orders against him and his church, formerly known as Solid Rock Church. Started at about 8:30 this morning, got started a little late because there were so many people they had to get rid of. A lot of people overflow, and then they put us back into the court. However, it did start out first with a settlement agreement with Regina Ward, one of her clients. Kelly, the terms were confidential.
Oh, wait a second.
Through
Is this an old clip?
churches, it did not matter what building it was. With 3 other individuals,
Hold on a second.
voluntary.
Didn't they talk about the settlement agreement? Wasn't that before? But he's talking about protesters. I had to take a time out a minute. Well, we'll just play it through.
Part of the Solid Rock Church, and that women stood in the gap for her, was her statement that she wanted to make. The settlement agreement, voluntary, removes the restraining order, and Mr. Miller cannot refile. Mr. Miller agreed, the judge agreed, and dismissed action number 1. Action number 2 is with 3 other individuals, represented by another attorney. The attorney requests that the witnesses be sequestered. That got to be a bit of a hot mess because I was asked to be, demanded to be at this particular court date as a witness. I told the judge that I didn't have anything to offer for December 22nd, December 29th, or January 5th. I only showed up as a reporter to do a story on the church and the protesters on February 16th. So there was, my testimony would serve as no foundation. I was up on the stand for about 2 minutes. I had nothing to say, and I was removed. Secondly, there was a lot of different witnesses that came up. A lot of people from the church, older ladies who go to the church. Reginald Miller came up. There was a minor child of one of the parishioners, the churchgoers, who she also testified. The daughter testified. That was very emotional. They're all saying the same thing, is that these 3 referred to as protesters all come to different locations. They hold up signs, they yell and scream at them, call them murderers, tell them that they're in a cult, yell justice for Mica. At one time there was a bomb threat. They have megaphones, they get online, they want them to go to jail. A lot of the witnesses described being scared, doxxed. Sweet old lady said she was doxxed. A lot of incitement of violence and hatred, according to the testimony. Interesting. Mr. Miller is basically fumbling through this court proceeding, mainly because he's not an attorney. So there's a lot of objections. He's trying to, probably not on purpose, maybe he is, trying to lead the witnesses into answers, which of course in the court of law you cannot do. So the attorney is objecting to that quite a bit, and a lot of basis for foundation for questions where they're just asking in general instead of specific dates of December 22nd, 29th, and January 5th at the specific churches where they were, or buildings which Mr. Miller referred to them as churches. It did not matter what building it was. That's it. They just took a break. We're going to go back in, go through more witnesses. Everything seems to be going fairly smooth. A little, the witnesses for Mr. Miller seem to be very nervous, rightly so, especially the young minor who proceeded to come off the stand, started to cry and hug her mother. So there's a lot of tensions going on, a lot of emotions. It's very high here. A lot of defendants I noticed were sitting there. They're taking notes, scribbling very fast, shaking their head a lot, turning around. At one point, the judge did have to tell the crowd that if any more outbreaks came, that they would be removed from the courtroom. So, going to get back in there. I'll get some more details for you. We'll see the outcome of this. So far, one case has had a settlement agreement, and now they're proceeding with 3. And I'll get back in. I'll come back out. If there is a decision today, I will let you know. Crime and Casca from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, at the Magistrate's Court. Crazy. See you, Crime Casca.
Yeah, I don't know, but I don't know if I agree with that guy's assessment. Apparently, the case got dismissed, and all the cases got dismissed. But it's crazy because before today, J.P. Miller was trying to work a deal out with these protesters. Obviously, the protesters said no and said take it to court, which they did today. Pastor John Paul Miller has offered to drop his lawsuits against protesters, but there's a catch. That is the report here I'm going to read because this is before he went in. He's trying to blackmail, more or less, these protesters by saying, well, if you stop protesting, I'll drop the lawsuits against you. So what is the catch, you might ask? What exactly is the catch? Let's get the catch. What was he trying to ask for? Please leave me alone. Please leave me alone. Please don't come in front of my house and watch me in my Spider-Man outfit. Remember the Spider-Man outfit and the DeLorean? Pastor John Paul Miller has offered to drop his barrage of lawsuits against protesters if they stay away from his new church. New church. Dun, dun, dun. Miller has filed 20 lawsuits last month targeting many of those who protested outside his former church after his wife's suicide. He sued for invasion of privacy and defamation, alleging protesters harassed and stalked him and led him to fear for his safety. Meanwhile, he gets arrested for assaulting someone. But some of the defendants contend his complaints are frivolous. In one instance, a woman said she didn't know Miller until she was named as a defendant in one of his lawsuits. Oh, so he's just name dropping people? All of Miller's complaints had been filed in the magistrate court, which hears disputes involving no more than 7,500. He has represented himself in every one of these cases. After 6 of Miller's complaints were dismissed, he faced the remaining defendants in court today to discuss the admissibility of certain evidence. There, he offered to drop those cases if the defendants agreed to stay at least 500 feet away from his new church. You know, he sold Solid Rock, as we discussed. He sold Solid Rock for $2 million to a place called Salem Holdings, Salem Woods Holdings, $2.15 million on February 13th. The goal for Miller at this point is to create a new church. A new church. He also applied for a 501c nonprofit status for a business called Living Water Church at Market Common. So no more Solid Rock. A new church he wants to start. Living Water Church at Market Common. Some people say another front. So he doesn't want those protesters from the last church to protest at Living Water, the new church. If the IRS approves that at some point, Living Water is dissolved, all of its assets would be distributed to Saint Delight Pentecostal Church. So he's getting involved with these other churches and creating new entities and everything. He's following the same blueprint as Reginald Wayne Miller did with the churches, for sure. Trying to obscure. Now, why doesn't J.P. Miller just leave? Why don't he just get that private plane, launch it out of Myrtle Beach, and take it somewhere else and start? Why don't he go to Africa? Why don't he just go somewhere else and start a church, even under a new name? Why does he continue to stay? See, staying in Myrtle Beach to the protesters is like sticking his middle finger at the protesters saying, you will not scare me away. But the protesters are very passionate, and they're seeking justice for Mica. They're seeking the passage of Mica's law, by the way. And I'd like to just remind the viewers, Mica's law, it's very important to get Mica's law passed, right? Mica's law would protect all victims of domestic violence and give them remedy to seek if something happens. You want to get this passed. Make sure you pass Mica's law. Mica's law will save lives for generations to come. For sure. Living Water Church. What's that about? What's that about? By the way, Mark Tinsley, you ever hear of Mark Tinsley? Sure you heard that name before. He has also joined in against J.P. Miller. Mark Tinsley. Alec Murdaugh case, Mark Tinsley has also joined in. So Mark Tinsley will be going against J.P. Miller on this. Now, there's something else I want to share, too, that's out there. By the way, I'll show you, let me get something here. I wanted to show you Mica Miller outside the courthouse so we all can see exactly what in the world is going on. But as I'm getting this out there, I want to share another incident with a woman who has just been arrested again, a fraudster. And we're going to talk about this woman here because she allegedly defrauded the Francis family, Mica's family, with some schemes centered around the death of Mica Miller. And she's been arrested before, and she's been arrested again. Susan Lynn Nelson, 44, from Georgia. And the article says, we're about to read, is this individual here. I don't know if you guys are familiar with her. It says, alleged TikTok fraudster arrested again. Woman accused of ripping off Mica Miller's family faces 3 unrelated felony charges in Georgia. Susan Lynn Nelson, 44, of Richmond Hill, Georgia, was just hit with the latest charges. She's being held without bail in the Bryan County Detention Center. She gained notoriety last fall after allegedly exploiting contributors participating in a TikTok fundraiser organized by a group called So-Called Mess. In her capacity with this group, Nelson volunteered to oversee fundraising efforts on behalf of the Francis family. More than $15,000 has been raised, but the family only received $180 out of that $15,000. She confessed to taking the money, claiming to spend it on booze and sex workers. Schemers, scammers that go in there and exploit a victim's family. She exploited the family, the Francis family, and kept pretty much all of it. They received peanuts. She wanted to set up and help set up a fund. Well, she's charged again. This time, she's arrested for embezzling more than $81,000 from a local high school booster club in Georgia. Lock her up. Lock her up. A schemer and a scammer centered around the Mica Miller case. Do you know Nelson here? Did you know about the Francis stuff? We never really touched on that before. I knew the family was getting scammed by quite a few people that were leeching around the family, trying to exploit and get them to go on board with things that they weren't necessarily on board with. But that usually happens with all these tragedies, ladies and gentlemen. It's the schemers and scammers that come out and scam innocent people, set up funds, going towards the cause they want you to think, but goes right into their pockets. And then they use it for drugs, booze, and as you heard, sex workers. Now I'm going to get the great Magnolia in the chat so we can discuss the latest on JP Miller. Maybe something I forgot. We'll bring her in. Magnolia is entrenched in this case. She's more entrenched in this case than I am on JP Miller. Hello, Magnolia. Come on in. Come on in. We haven't done Magnolia in a while, folks.
Hello.
Hello. How are you, Magnolia?
Good afternoon. Hi, everybody.
All right. What first comes to your mind, Magnolia?
Well, yeah, I was just putting in the chat, we're talking about these cases. John Paul Miller brought these lawsuits against the protesters, trying to basically get them to stop protesting at the church. He said that it affected them being able to operate. They had to close their doors. Of course, we just recently reported that he sold the church for $2.15 million, that property in Market Commons. So he was trying to go after these protesters because he probably rightfully so blames them for the church shutting down, but he doesn't take accountability for his part in why they're protesting, of course. But I don't know if people realize there are over 30 of these lawsuits that he was doing. There's like 33, and they're all these pro se. He's defending him. He's, going into court, representing himself with these lawsuits. And one thing that he tried to do, I sent you this document. One of the people that he was going after had sent me the document that he wanted these people to sign. And so basically he had come up with this agreement with these lawsuits, and he was telling the people he's suing, he's like, I'll drop the lawsuit as long as you agree to XYZ. And he literally wrote these agreements, and apparently Regina Ward was part of this mediation back and forth, and a couple people were actually advised to sign these agreements by Regina Ward. The person I spoke to did not want to sign this because the agreement, not only did the agreement say that the person would agree not to come within 500 feet of the property, the new church property, but he was also demanding that these people delete all of their social media posts about Solid Rock. Because you can't tell people what to post online. People can post whatever they want to post online as long as it's not criminal in nature. So he's trying to use these lawsuits as a way to get people to do what he wants. He wants people to delete all their social media because it looks bad for him. And so these agreements were just ridiculous. And thankfully, the victim I spoke to chose not to sign this because we were fairly certain that these lawsuits would get thrown out regardless because they're just frivolous. Again, you can't tell people what to do or dictate what people say through the use of lawfare, which is what he's trying to do. He's been trying to do this for months and months and months because he has created a nightmare situation for himself. All of this is brought on by himself. And as a way to deal with the backlash and the scrutiny, he thinks it's a bright idea to just go around suing everybody and making people stop talking about him. But that's just not how things work in America. So, all of the lawsuits have been dismissed now. And I said the number was something like 33 altogether that he had filed, including the paralegal one. He sued the paralegal for like $6 million, but he dropped that case. That one was, I don't know if he dropped it, but it was dismissed anyway on the 19th. So that one is also gone. And that number does not even include the restraining orders on top of it, because a bunch of people got restraining orders who didn't also get the lawsuit. Remember last year he kept saying he was going to sue Charlotte, which was Mica's best friend. Well, I don't think he ever did actually sue her, but I believe she also received a restraining order. So he was just throwing out restraining orders left and right, lawsuits, filing lawsuits, and all of it is just him spinning his wheels, trying to get out of the mess that he has himself in. But it's not going to work. He's back to square zero.
I have breaking news, Magnolia. This is now being circulated that a lawsuit has just been filed against Trisha Ross. And they're showing a 2025 court filing on 2/20/2025, National Finance versus Trisha Ross. So now she's being sued. Trisha Ross
so that sounds like a debt company.
Probably. Trisha Ross, National Finance versus Trisha D. Ross. Filed.
Well, my first guess on that, it's not a big leap to guess what that was caused by. We talked about this last year extensively. Trisha Ross has been working with John Paul for many, many years. She's basically like his right-hand person, and he pays a lot of her bills through the church. Her house, her car was financed through the church, all of those things. And we said last year, what is Trisha Ross going to do when he's not able to pay her mortgage anymore? What's going to happen to Trisha when all the money dries up, all the people leave the church? You don't have tithes and offering like you're used to having. So what was going to happen? So to me, that's maybe what's going on here. Maybe the mortgage wasn't getting paid, or some other bill hasn't been getting paid, and so now she's getting sued for legal bills.
All centered to be around him, though. It's because of him. It's because of him. Everything he touches turns to crap. Literally.
Yeah.
Nothing goes right. Everyone that he gets involved with, whether it's the steroids guy, the guy with the steroids gets arrested, Trisha Ross, Robert Locel, the sprinkler guy, everybody that he gets involved with, something bad. Susie Skinner's husband, just crazy stuff.
Yeah.
It's crazy stuff.
Yep.
This guy's he's just a lightning rod of controversy, a lightning rod of just chaos, and no stability whatsoever centered around J.P. Miller.
Yeah, I mean, it's that, but it's also the fact that pretty much everyone he knows is a criminal. Everyone in his immediate circle, quite literally, is a criminal. And these are the people that he associates with. I mean, just go down the list. I mean, his own father has criminal issues going back decades and decades and decades. So does he. Trisha Ross had her own issues in the past. All these people that he runs with, they're criminals. Like the steroid guy, same thing. I mean, if you just look at the people that he surrounds himself with, they're basically operating a criminal ring amongst themselves. That's what they're doing. That's what they've been doing for all this time, unchecked.
Yeah, but what is the end game here? What happens? Ultimately, he's going to end up in prison. And the feds are going to indict him. Do you agree that the feds will indict him?
Yeah, and yes, of course. And I just can't get over what a colossal waste of time and energy these lawsuits were for him, because it's just, you really have to wonder. I mean, we constantly said last year, and you're saying it again now, why doesn't he just lay low? I mean, this was like the number one question we had all summer. We were like, why doesn't he just pack up the car with Susie, go off somewhere, I don't know where, but somewhere, and just lay low? And it's like he just could never do it. For a while, he was going through this phase where he was posting TikToks every day and just saying the most outlandish things, disparaging Mica's memory, talking bad about her family. I mean, it just never ended. And then finally, he got the agreement with her family regarding her estate and things like that. And so that brought the videos to an end. But it's just never-ending drama with him. You know, he had protesters outside the church, which I get is frustrating to have constant protesters every week. But he never did himself any favors, because he would come out there and instigate trouble with the protesters. He would, you know, he put that guy up to spraying them with the sprinkler. He's going up, he's confronting people. He's caught on camera confronting people, getting in their face, grabbing their phone, doing all these crazy things. Like, he just never, you know, did himself any favors, and the whole thing just completely collapsed. But it was expected. I think for me, it was surprising that the church lasted as long as it did. I fully expected all of that to fall apart much sooner than it did, but he has now sold that property, and they apparently have plans to keep going with their new church on the new land that they bought. And that's what he wants to do. He wants to bring the remaining people from his congregation, and they want to start their new church, and they don't want anyone to bother them. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, I think the next live that we'll have, he will probably be indicted, but we'll see. He'll probably still continue to use lawfare against individuals, make accusations, and file law. You know, he's filing a pro se. Until he gets some sanctions back thrown at him or whatever like that, there's really no downside of him doing this. It's just costing him filing fees and whatnot. I don't think he has to pay for the defendant's attorney fees. Therefore, he'll just pay the filing fee and start filing. I don't even know if you have to pay a filing fee for restraining orders. But he'll just continue to do this tactic and pattern. And I think he will. And maybe his goal is to scare off the protesters so they don't interfere with his new operation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the more interesting things to come out of all this is the lawsuit filed by the Jane Doe who says that she was sexually assaulted by him in 1998 and then again in 2023. That's crazy. That he would try to target the same person. It kind of tells me this is someone who he's known for quite a long time, and probably she probably tried to stay away from him, and maybe he tried to get back into her life. But what's wild about this is the fact that Mark Tinsley joined that case. Mark Tinsley is not someone to play with. I mean, he did a lot of work on Alec Murdaugh's cases where Alec was accused of exploiting, his position of power in his law firm to basically steal from clients. And that was a massive success on their part. I mean, he testified in the murder trial. A lot of people probably remember him coming up on the stand and whipping out the piece of paper. He literally brought receipts with him to the court, to the stand that day. He's a really good attorney, especially when it comes to this type of criminal conduct. And what we're talking about here, we're not just talking about a couple incidents of sexual assault. We're talking about years, decades worth of abuse, targeting minors, predatory conduct, basically trafficking. that's what these are very, very, very serious things that John Paul Miller and his father are facing. And another thing that's interesting to me, if you look at like the Diddy case that we've been following, also his case really was launched by a similar lawsuit by Cassie, his former girlfriend. She filed a lawsuit alleging abuse, physical, sexual abuse, and 6 months later he was indicted on trafficking in RICO. So I think that this lawsuit in particular will end up being one part of the greater criminal case against John Paul and his father and whoever else they go after. Because to me, this is a clear RICO type of case.
Interesting. Yeah, that pretty much sums up of what's going on. The lawsuit is out there. It's multiple pages. We're not going to read it per se, but it is out there. It's long. It's lengthy. I'll just show it here and just scroll down real quick. But it's a mega lawsuit that was filed in the 15th Judicial District against J.P. Miller, Wayne Miller, the All Nations Cathedral Church, Cathedral Baptist Church, and Solid Rock Ministries. It just goes on and on and on and on and on with numerous accusations and details of this. Magnolia, what J.P. Miller's going to do about this lawsuit here? Do you think he's going to have to get a lawyer to defend himself on this, or do you think he's going to go the pro se route? Because so far I haven't seen any indication that he has a lawyer on it.
Well, I think for him, I think it would be advisable to get an attorney for sure.
You know how much that will cost for these type of allegations just alone? 50 to 100K.
Well, I mean, and the allegations carry criminal implications.
Yes.
I mean, this isn't just...
Well, also they do this for fact finding too, because, you get them under oath,
right.
That deposition, interrogatories, discovery, you get all that. And sometimes that kind of stuff can be used against you in the criminal aspect, correct?
Yeah.
Or a fact finding mission.
Austin said Russell Long is his attorney. Well, Russell Long is an attorney for John Paul.
That has represented him.
He has represented John Paul, but all of these cases we're talking about, John Paul decided to represent himself. Also, we actually don't know if Russell is still working with John Paul or not, simply because last week when the news broke that John Paul had sold the church, Russell B. Long was quoted in the media as saying he was unaware that the church had been sold. So
how would you be unaware if you... Yes.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to be really closely tied with John Paul, just based on that. I mean, if he was, he would obviously have known about the sale going through. So yeah, I don't know where Russell's at in all this, but it doesn't seem like we've heard much from him, and he seems like he's out of the loop for sure.
We got to pay him money too. You have to pay him money. Where's JP getting all this money? Well, you just got $2 million, though. I mean, $2 million is a lot, but I mean, I don't know if it all goes to JP Miller or he has to distribute it out. But, we got the sale of Solid Rock. What does he do with all that money? Mounting legal bills, defense fund.
A lot of it will probably go to legal bills, and just, depending on who else from his circle ends up with charges, they're going to need that money. But, I don't know. Does the FBI seize his assets at some point?
Well, they
they moved all that money out of Solid Rock's name into another LLC name. So I don't know.
Great work as usual. Anything else you'd like to add, Magnolia, to the chat?
Yeah, I have one thing that I just saw pop up. Now, I don't know if this is related at all to John Paul Miller, but this is in regards to South Carolina anyway. There was a media advisory that was just put out by Brooke Andrews, acting U.S. Attorney for the District of South Carolina. They said Acting U.S. Attorney Brooke Andrews and FBI Special Agent in Charge Steve Jensen will make an announcement today in a criminal case at 2 p.m. in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. So there's some sort of news conference coming about a criminal case in South Carolina.
Well, that's 2 o'clock now. 2 o'clock now. Can you send?
We don't know who that pertains to, but that was put out.
Can you find me the link and I can click on it and see what's going on? It's coming from a Facebook page. Facebook page. Let's see if we can find this and see, because it is 2 p.m. Let's see what this is about.
Looks like this might be, let's see, Fitz News just put something out. It looks like there is going to be an indictment of North Charleston City Council. So it doesn't look like it's related to
You're
this.
saved for now, JP. You're saved. You're saved. You can rest.
I know. I saw that pop up a little bit ago, and I was like, oh boy.
I know, that's crazy, right? All right, well, we'll continue to monitor the case of Mica Francis, J.P. Miller, and what happens moving forward, whether it's restraining orders, court hearings, indictments, or any other drama or craziness. We'll share it here, but that seems like that is the latest, and we're up to speed,
Yep.
I think. Correct?
Yep.
All right. Thank you for the insight, Magnolia, as always.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. All right, folks. J.P. Miller, what do you think? What's your thoughts? Love to hear the comments. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification button. Anything else comes out of this guy, we'll share. Definitely share when he gets indicted. When he gets indicted. Remember that. When, not if. We cover true crime 24/7, 365 from the JLR Batcave. Let me know what you think. Justice for Mica. Get Mica's list, Mica's law passed ASAP. Protect the lives. If you see something, say something. If you're in a bad relationship, you can escape. You can escape it. Do never let somebody subject you to years of abuse. Break free. Get away from it. We'll talk soon. Have a good day, everyone. JLR Investigate. Stay safe out there.